In a stunning move on July 30th, 2025, President Donald Trump announced the immediate cancellation of all remaining tariffs on Canadian goods. The announcement, made in front of a packed press corps, took both political analysts and business leaders by surprise, signaling a dramatic shift in the administration's approach to international trade. This abrupt decision ends a years-long trade war that strained relations and disrupted industries on both sides of the border. For nearly half a decade, businesses faced mounting costs and uncertainty, as tariffs on key goods created bottlenecks at ports and border crossings, slowing the flow of trade between two of the world's closest allies. Speaking from the White House lawn, Trump admitted the economic battle with Canada had failed to deliver the results he wanted. He acknowledged that American workers and companies had paid a steep price, and that the time had come to put an end to the escalating dispute. The announcement marks a dramatic shift in his America First trade policy, sending shockwaves through global markets. Investors reacted instantly, with stock prices for manufacturing and agricultural companies surging, while analysts scrambled to assess the long-term impact of this unexpected policy reversal. For years, tariffs on products like steel, aluminum, lumber, and dairy had weighed heavily on businesses and consumers. Prices for everyday goods rose, and entire industries were forced to adapt to new supply chain challenges, with some companies even relocating operations to avoid the extra costs. Today's reversal brings instant relief to industries that have struggled under the extra costs and uncertainty. Factory floors are buzzing with renewed activity, and business owners are hopeful that this marks the beginning of a more stable and prosperous era for cross-border commerce. Farmers, manufacturers, and small business owners, long vocal in their opposition, finally see hope for recovery. Many have already begun planning to ramp up production, rehire workers, and rebuild relationships with Canadian partners that were strained during the trade war. The world is watching. Is this a new era of cooperation, or a one-off move to address political pressure at home? Experts are divided, with some predicting a thaw in U.S.-Canada relations, while others warn that deeper issues remain unresolved. Whatever the reason, the end of the trade war is a major development with lasting effects on both economies. The lifting of tariffs is expected to boost trade, create jobs, and restore confidence among businesses and consumers alike. President Trump's legacy as a tough negotiator now includes a rare public admission of defeat and a chance to rebuild a vital partnership. As both nations look to the future, the hope is that this truce will pave the way for stronger economic ties and renewed trust between neighbors. To understand the impact of today's news, let's break down tariffs. A tariff is a tax on imported goods, making foreign products more expensive and encouraging people to buy domestic. President Trump made tariffs central to his economic strategy, arguing that countries like Canada were taking advantage of the U.S. in trade deals. He believed tariffs would protect American industries and bring back lost jobs. The idea used tariffs as leverage to force better deals and rebalance global trade. Critics warned tariffs could backfire, triggering retaliation and raising prices for American consumers. Despite warnings, Trump pressed on, sparking a trade war with Canada that became a defining example of his approach. The result? Years of economic conflict, uncertainty, and rising costs for both nations. Today's reversal signals a recognition that the costs outweighed the benefits. The U.S.-Canada trade war began with targeted tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, marking a sudden and dramatic shift in the long-standing economic partnership between the two nations. For decades, steel and aluminum had flowed freely across the border, supporting industries and jobs on both sides. The Trump administration justified these tariffs as a national security measure, arguing that reliance on foreign metals threatened the integrity of American infrastructure and defense. This rationale surprised many, as Canada had always been considered a close ally. Canada, shocked by the accusation and the sudden imposition of tariffs, responded swiftly with its own set of retaliatory tariffs on American goods carefully chosen to hit politically sensitive states and industries, aiming to pressure U.S. lawmakers to reconsider. Everyday products like whiskey, yogurt, and orange juice suddenly became pawns in a growing economic standoff, with prices rising and uncertainty spreading among consumers and businesses alike. The conflict quickly expanded to include other key sectors such as lumber and dairy, with both sides escalating tariffs and issuing threats. Industries that had long depended on cross-border trade now found themselves at the center of a political storm. Decades-old supply chains were disrupted almost overnight, and the once friendly relationship between the U.S. and Canada began to sour, replaced by suspicion and frustration. Businesses on both sides of the border faced higher costs, shrinking profit margins and growing uncertainty, forcing many to adapt quickly or risk suffering significant losses. Small businesses in particular struggled to absorb the sudden changes. The trade war, sparked by a few targeted actions, soon engulfed nearly every sector of the two deeply intertwined economies, from manufacturing and agriculture to retail and transportation. What began as a dispute over metals and lumber quickly escalated into a widespread conflict, affecting countless businesses and workers, with no easy solution in sight. The economic pain deepened as the standoff dragged on, with stock markets reacting nervously, factories closing, and economic indicators pointing downward. The stage was set for a dramatic showdown, as both nations braced for the next chapter in a conflict that would test the resilience of their economies and their historic alliance. The trade war, intended to help American workers, often did the opposite. U.S. manufacturers relying on Canadian steel and aluminum faced higher costs, forcing tough choices, raise prices, or cut jobs. Farmers were hit hard as Canada retaliated with tariffs on American agricultural products, shrinking a vital export market. Many lost income and, in some cases, their farms. The construction industry suffered too, as tariffs on Canadian lumber drove up home prices and slowed building. While some steel producers saw short-term gains, most businesses faced higher costs and uncertainty. Expansion plans stalled, layoffs increased, and consumers paid more. The ripple effects showed that in a global economy, trade wars rarely produce clear winners. Instead, they create complex challenges for the very people they're meant to protect. On the Canadian side, U.S. tariffs hit hard. Key industries like steel, aluminum, and lumber saw sales to the U.S. plummet or profits shrink as companies absorbed tariff costs. The uncertainty made it nearly impossible for businesses to plan or invest, stalling job growth and economic expansion. Canadian consumers felt the pinch too, as retaliatory tariffs on American goods drove up prices on everyday items. Grocery bills rose and families had less to spend. The trade war forced Canada to rethink its economic strategy, seeking new markets in Europe and Asia. But shifting away from the U.S. was slow and difficult. In the short term, the damage was real: lost jobs, higher prices, and stalled growth. The conflict exposed just how dependent Canada was on stable trade with its southern neighbor. Relief was desperately needed. While the public saw only escalating conflict and heated rhetoric, a very different story was unfolding behind the scenes. For months, away from cameras and headlines, secret negotiations were quietly taking place, hidden from public view. Senior U.S. and Canadian officials met in discreet locations, determined to find a solution that would resolve the crisis without making either government appear to be backing down or losing face in the eyes of their citizens. The real turning point came when influential American business leaders stepped in, urging the White House to act. They presented compelling evidence, detailed reports showing lost sales, rising costs for manufacturers, and the threat of widespread job cuts if the dispute continued. The economic pain was spreading fast, with factories idled, retail stores shuttered, and workers growing increasingly anxious about their futures. The mounting losses became impossible for leaders to ignore. In response, Canadian negotiators put forward a practical, face-saving plan: a gradual removal of tariffs paired with new commitments to closely monitor exports and prevent future disputes. This approach allowed President Trump to claim victory, touting a stronger deal for Americans, while also providing a dignified exit from the standoff for both sides. The secrecy of these talks was crucial. It gave negotiators the freedom to discuss sensitive issues, make concessions, and build trust without the pressure of public scrutiny or political grandstanding. When the agreement was finally ready, it offered President Trump a clear and public opportunity to announce the end of the trade war, signaling a new chapter in U.S.-Canada relations. This breakthrough was the direct result of mounting economic pressure, persistent behind-the-scenes diplomacy, and the willingness of both nations to compromise for the greater good. With the world watching, the stage was set for a dramatic public reversal, one that would reshape the economic landscape and restore stability to both countries. The most shocking moment came when President Trump addressed the nation. He said, "We fought hard, but you have to know when to fold. On this one with Canada, I lost. We lost." This rare admission broke from his usual image as an unyielding winner. For supporters, it was a sign of honesty and practical leadership. For critics, proof that his trade strategy had failed. The statement opened the door for healing between the U.S. and Canada, signaling a willingness to move forward. Canadian leaders saw it as a victory for their patient response. The phrase, "I lost," will be remembered as a defining moment of Trump's presidency. It showed the limits of power in a globalized world. Sometimes the cost of fighting outweighs the political price of backing down. Trump's admission marked a turning point in U.S.-Canada relations. The response to Trump's announcement was swift and overwhelmingly positive. Stock markets in both countries surged, with companies hardest hit by tariffs like automakers and home builders seeing immediate gains. Industry groups praised the decision, hopeful for lower costs and renewed growth. Farmers looked forward to regaining lost Canadian markets. In Canada, the dollar strengthened, and business leaders welcomed the return of stability. Not everyone was happy. Some U.S. steelworkers worried about renewed competition. But for most, the end of the trade war meant relief, predictability, and a chance to rebuild. The economic partnership could finally begin to heal. The mood was one of optimism for the future. With tariffs gone, the U.S. and Canada must now rebuild trust and restore normal trade. Officials will set up new working groups to monitor key sectors and prevent future disputes. For consumers, prices on goods like cars and homes should fall. For farmers and manufacturers, lost markets can be reclaimed. Canadians will see more job security and lower prices on American products. Trump's admission may signal a shift toward negotiation over confrontation in future U.S. trade policy. The world is watching to see if this cooperative approach spreads to other trade disputes. The end of the trade war is a reminder of how deeply connected the two nations are. Moving forward, the focus will be on strengthening this partnership for shared prosperity. Together, the U.S. and Canada face the future as allies once again.